Growing up in the early 2000s, I never exactly had the newest gaming technology. Closest thing to it was my Game Boy Advance. So instead of having a PlayStation 2, GameCube, or an original Xbox, consoles I grew up with were an old Sega Genesis, NES, and a PlayStation 1. And of course, being a kid, instead of getting the next big release, I'd get some kind of license game that was involved with a movie or show I liked. And today, I'm going to talk about one of those games. Now, if my channel aims to prove anything, it's that not all licensed games are bad. They're a grab bag of things, ranging from some downright amazing games to literally the worst thing ever made. But unfortunately, a lot of licensed games seem to reside in this purgatory level, where they aren't necessarily horrible, but they really aren't good either. If you couldn't guess by now, the game we're going to be looking at today happens to fall into that category. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So, going back to the PlayStation I grew up with, I had plenty of games that were considered classics on the system, like the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro games. But I also had some licensed game, which my family must have assumed would appeal to me or my sisters. Now, some of these were pretty good. I used to love the original Digimon World game, and the Treasure Planet game on the system was also one of my favorites. And don't worry, I'll get to talking about Treasure Planet games one day. But some of the other games we had, such as a Blue's Clues point-and-click adventure that my sister used to play, Smurf Eraser, and Bob the Builder Can We Fix It, and don't worry, I'll get to those last two one day too, weren't exactly stellar games to have. But none of those games are what I'm here to talk about today. No, this video is about something else entirely. Now, I mentioned Digimon World earlier. I used to play Digimon World a lot. And I mean a lot. It's this part life/pet simulator, part RPG sort of game, where you have your own Digimon to raise, to take care of, and train and such, while also trying to take care of the city that you start in. It was pretty fun, or at least from what I remember it was. But Digimon World wasn't the only Digimon game that I had as a kid. The other one I had, and still actually have to this day, is a little game called Digimon Rumble Arena. I didn't play this as much, mostly with my sister, but I decided to revisit recently and see what it's like. Digimon Rumble Arena is a fighting game, as if you couldn't tell by the name. It was developed together by Bandai and Hudson Soft, being released on the original PlayStation in late 2001 in Japan, and here in the States in early 2002. Keep those dates in mind, I'll get back to them later. The game released to mixed review scores, but managed to sell enough copies to become a greatest hits title. Now, I don't remember too much about the Digimon anime or movie, but I must have watched it quite a bit for my parents to get me not one, but two Digimon games. This game in particular is based on the first few seasons of the anime, with an original character being created to use as the final boss. More on him later. In terms of presentation, the graphics are fine, pretty much. They certainly aren't pushing the boundaries of the PlayStation's capabilities, but the character models look good enough. At the very least, they're true to the anime. The textures, for the most part, look good, although there are a few scattered textures that are pretty obviously out of place. And that's about where the praise for the presentation ends, I'm afraid. The menus are serviceable, but very bare bones. They try to fit the digital aesthetic of the show, but they're not very interesting to look at, and they have very few options within them. And the loading screens either have just the Digimon logo, or if you're in gameplay, it'll show you a static image of your opponent with the names of their special attacks. Bland, boring, lazy. But it's the sound department where it really falls apart. They have the voice actors from the show back to do the voices for their respective characters, and it's a nice touch, I do appreciate it. But what I don't appreciate is the horrendous sound quality of these voice clips. These clips are so bit crunch that it's hard to tell what they're saying half the time, and even when you can, you don't really want to. When I was younger, I always thought Guilmon was saying Backbreaker for his triangle special. It wasn't until I picked someone else and saw his moveset on the loading screen, then I realized that it's actually Rockbreaker. And the worst part is, characters shout their battle cry every single time you use a special attack. Every single time. I swear, it's mind-numbing. The music, on the other hand, is actually pretty good. Every track is at least decent, with a few actually good tracks that stand out over the others. My personal favorites are Freezy Arctic because it kinda reminds me of something you'd hear in Crash Bandicoot, as well as Bad Guys Festival as it's the best example of the overall music style this game goes for, and also Reapermon's Den, which is the song playing in the background right now. Unfortunately, since I've had my copy of this game since I was a little kid, the disc has gotten scratched up enough that the music doesn't really cooperate anymore. Sometimes it works fine, Other times it skips and cuts around a lot, and almost always, even if the music works fine in the first round of a fight, it'll completely cut out for the next one. It's a little disheartening, really. Also makes a lot of the victory quotes skip, but that's not really a big deal. Most of the other audio clips are unaffected, however, so it's really just the battle music and the victory quotes that are screwed up. But of course, it's called a game because of the gameplay, right? And the gameplay here, well, have I got some things to say about this. The game is a 1v1 fighter, taking place in 2D multi-platform levels. The controls are pretty simple, with square being a melee attack, triangle and circle being different special attacks, usually triangle is a physical attack and circle is a projectile, and X-axis jump button with L1 being your guard button. There's also a way to grab enemies, but I can never get it to happen willingly. It tends to just happen randomly, but I assume that it's some kind of combination of directional button and melee attack when you're close to your opponent. As simple as the controls are, they tend to feel a bit sluggish and even borderline unresponsive sometimes. So instead of being a fun, polished experience, it just comes off clunky. Each character also has an elemental attribute, but these make pretty much no notable difference in gameplay. Now, looking at the gameplay, there's an obvious comparison to be made here. Just based off looking, you'd be quick to say, oh, it's just like Super Smash Bros, but with health bars. And honestly, you'd be exactly right. Now, I mentioned those release dates earlier. Super Smash Bros. Melee came out in Japan in November of 2001, just a couple of weeks before Digimon Rumble Arena did. The unfortunate reality is, Rumble Arena was probably meant to be a contender to go with the original N64 Smash Bros. Before getting completely overshadowed by Melee's release. But the real question is, was Digimon Rumble Arena the very first Smash clone? I mean, besides Digimon Battle Spirit, which basically like playing the coin mode of Melee, which came out in the WonderSwan color in Japan in October 2001, a month and a half before the release of Melee, actually predating Melee's coin mode, so who's a ripoff artist here anyway? But maybe I'm reading too much into it. Oh well. Anyway, back to Rumble Arena. During fights, the game tends to have slowdown in the frame rate department, especially in the jungle level with the rolling boulders. Speaking of which, most every stage has its own stage hazard. Many of these are easily avoidable, such as the aforementioned boulders, but others are pretty bullshit. Specifically, the ice physics in the ice stage are so detrimental to any fight on that stage, as it's easy to just use a special move to knock your opponent off the stage and they'll take damage from the respawn. Similarly, in the volcano stage, there are pits of lava where you can not only fall in and take respawn damage, but you also take damage from the lava itself before you respawn, doing even more damage than usual. It's pretty frustrating. Aside from these stage hazards, the level designs are mostly just okay. Nothing special, but nothing too horrible either. As you fight, a meter above your health bar fills up. Once this meter is full, you can activate your character's Digivolution, which is pretty much the most unique thing about this game. When you Digivolve, you turn to a more powerful character, doing more damage and having different special attacks. And if you press R1, R2, L1, and L2 together in your Digivolve form, you'll launch into your character's ultimate attack, which does anywhere from a quarter to a third of your opponent's health bar usually. Because of this, the game often turns into a race to Digivolution, beating on your opponent until your Digivolve meter is almost run out, and then launching your ultimate attack quickly before it's done. And later on, you can unlock pre-Digivolved versions of characters, making the base form characters oftentimes no longer worth playing. I should probably mention the Powerup Cards, too. On every stage except one, there are these Powerup Cards that spawn every so often, giving different effects when you collect them. Some of these are stat boosts, some of which having negative effects on your character also, as well as different fireball attacks, and some that add to your Digivolution meter. There's also food that occasionally pops up that can refill a bit of your health bar. Honestly, aside from the ones that add to your meter, these make little to no difference in gameplay. Now, the game has no story to speak of, just an arcade mode and a versus mode. There's also a minigame mode for the minigames you play in one part of the arcade mode, and honestly, all these minigames suck. When getting footage for this video, I only got to play 2 of the games. One of them was literally seeing who could press a square button 120 times faster than the other person, and the other one was throwing balls at items in the sky to get more points than your opponent. Both were pointless, boring, and not very fun at all. The majority of game time is going to be spent in the arcade mode. Arcade mode is, of course, exactly how you'd expect it to be. You play through a few fights broken up by a single minigame in the middle, before facing off with the final boss, Reapermon, at the end of it all. If you manage to beat every enemy without dying once, one of your last bouts will be replaced with a fight against Black War Greymon. Beat him and Reapermon also without dying, and you'll unlock Black War Greymon as a playable character. Now, this is of course easier said than done. I decided to play through the first time with my boy Guilmon, because I'm fairly certain he's the character I used to main as a kid, so he felt the most comfortable to just pick up and play. Reapermon is, how should I say this? Reapermon is overpowered as fuck. There is such a difficulty spike once you get to him. Even now, after going back to this game after all these years, he still kicked my ass multiple times. The rest of the game is a pushover in comparison. His attacks do so much damage to you no matter what you do about it, and his ultimate attack can do nearly half of your health if you don't block it. Even in your Digivolve form, he's still way too overpowered. And to make matters worse, the stage where you fight him is just one flat plane with no items. All that's in the background is a disorienting array of colors and shapes flying at you, making the fight against him seem harder than it already was, and certainly much harder than it needed to be. This game is for kids after all. If you manage to beat him, you will unlock him as a playable character, but it's way harder than it needs to be. And I know what you're thinking, I should just turn down the difficulty, right? Well, I went into the settings to do that, and it was on easy mode this whole time? Jesus Christ, that's ridiculous! When I did finally beat him, it wasn't exactly by skill. I basically just ran back and forth and kept using Rock Breaker until he finally stopped getting up. As a side note, in the options menu there is an option to input some passwords. These passwords relate to things from the show, I'm sure, and they can be used to unlock some other characters more easily. I don't know if this is mandatory to unlock any of the characters, but it is an option nonetheless. After finally beating Reapermon, I decided I'd get some sweet revenge on this game by playing through as Reapermon and just bodying the arcade mode. I was also curious as to who the final boss might be, since I was playing as the final boss, but alas, it was just a palette swap of Reapermon. And as expected, the game is way too easy with him, even if you move the difficulty up. Even Black War Greymon and Reapermon don't stand a chance against a user-controlled Reapermon, and seeing Reapermon playing minigames is just silly. So what happened to this game after its release? Well, as previously mentioned, it made plenty of money, earning it a spot in PlayStation's Greatest Hits collection. Thanks to this, it managed to get a direct sequel a few years later, on the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, which I haven't played, but I've heard it improved a good amount of things from the first. It also got a spiritual successor on the PS3 and Xbox 360 called Digimon All-Star Rumble, which never even saw a Japanese release, which I also have not played. Personally, I wouldn't call this game a must-play on the PlayStation. Honestly, I don't even remember liking it as a kid that much. It's not horrible, but it's mostly just one of those meh kind of licensed games. And I mean, I also had Tekken 3 for my PlayStation, so if I really wanted to play a fighting game on it, I was a million times more likely to play Tekken 3 than Rumble Arena. I'd recommend skipping out on this game, especially if the second one is better. Maybe I'll check out the second one sometime in the future. But other than that, this game really is better off being left forgotten. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, like the video, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, just to try to get me somewhere on this magical land called YouTube. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, a lot of stuff's been going on, I haven't really had time or patience to do a video like this, but I plan on uploading more frequently from here on out, at least once a month. If you liked this video, why don't you check out my last review, which was Dragon Ball Evolution on the PSP. Not as bad as the game as you'd think. Or go ahead and click on the right and watch my quick look at Super Hexagon, which is an indie game that me and my friends used to play all the time. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.